Chair Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Nyhan,
I think that's a yes, right? She is there. I see her.
Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
All members accounted for.
All right. And we will now move on to the next item, which is the approval of the July 13th minutes. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes? Anyone? Councilmember Edens, seconded by Councilmember Nyhan. Any questions or comments on the minutes from that meeting? Anything else? Let's see. Oh, the only thing I will ask for is just an editorial change in the welcome, the roll call. That first sentence, it says Chair Garitano called the meeting to order. That needs to be updated to, I guess, Acting Chair Bertolino.
Bertolino, got
I
it.
think, Joe, I think one Italian can sub for any other Italian, so it doesn't make any difference what the.
Oh. That's it. All right. Well, we'll get that done. Anything else? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes with that change there, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right. The minutes are approved. So we'll keep moving forward there. Do we have anybody under public participation? I don't see anyone on Zoom, but Rick, you can confirm.
Chair Garitano, I do not see anybody that appears to be available for that purpose or online for that purpose.
All right. And I don't think we have anything that's submitted for the committee, so we will move forward beyond that. Next, under Public Works, we do have one just for it. It's under for information. I don't believe there is much of an update because out of that last meeting, there was a group that was going to discuss the deer management topic, and Councilmember Rambo mentioned that he had responded about meeting, but sounds like that still needs to happen. So I'm going to ask City Administrator Cross to confirm that, and if that's still in progress or what.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had sent out another email last week indicating that we were still trying to pull together a meeting of the 4 individuals that were named to the subcommittee, Mr. Rambo, Mr. Brost, Mr. Bertolino, and Sergeant Wendling. And in lieu of an in-person meeting that we initially were trying for, the schedules didn't work, so I was attempting to set up a Zoom meeting to do so, and I've not heard back from those 4 participants in terms of a day or a time that would work for each of them. So if the feeling is that from the 3 folks on the call here, if you all still feel that you want to get together just for an initial kickoff meeting, this is not going to be an ongoing thing, but the hope was, or at least as it was communicated to me, we would at least have an initial meeting, then everyone can determine what their individual responsibilities and to-dos would be, and then everyone would go off and do that. So I'm just waiting to get emails from each of the members of that subcommittee, and then we can schedule that meeting. So
Right.
if you 3 gentlemen can do that, and I will coordinate then with Sergeant Wendling once we get a day and a time that works for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, so you guys have that asked, and just get back with Steve on that time when that works, and that'll happen.
Yeah. Hey, guys, this is Rob. Steve, I feel I've responded to you a couple times, and basically my thing is I'll work around the rest of the folks because it's a priority for me, and I'm available. So your response is, anything that works for the other guys is fine with me.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for that. All right, I don't see any other for action items on the Public Works, so we're going to move into for administration. We've got 3 for information items. I'm going to let City Administrator Cross just provide some quick updates on these. These are just updates, so no decisions need to be made, no action, but just to keep you informed of where we are with these. So, Steve, if you want to take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, these will just be real quick updates. The first item, the American flag disposal box. The committee hopefully will recall that a young man in a local scout troop approached Mr. Garitano about the possibility of installing an American flag disposal box here at City Hall. Mr. Garitano passed that along to me. I have since reached out to the scout. You all graciously approved that request with the caveat that the individual and his troop would be responsible for making sure that the flags were retrieved from that disposal box and then properly disposed of. So I responded back to the scout, copied Mr. Garitano, and said, you know, I'm available to meet, but we can get together. We can determine what the box is going to look like and that it meets certain requirements. Identified the caveat that I just spoke about, and then we could, and also that we would talk about the location of it. I have not heard back from the young man. I think his mom was also copied on that email. So we're just waiting to hear back from him, and then we can actually move this project forward. So that's the situation there for the American flag disposal box. Mr. Chair, I'll just keep going on to the next 2 items if that's okay with you. All right. Lobbyist for the city. Again, the committee will recall that it was the desire of the mayor to, and I think council too, to move forward with seeing that for the city to hire a lobbyist that would be in Jeff City and working on behalf of the city for items that came before the committees there in Jeff City. An RFQ was subsequently put together. That RFQ then, well, first of all, you all named a subcommittee, you know, to do that. And that subcommittee consisted of the mayor, consisted of Chair Garitano, and consisted of Councilmember Edens. And then I was the staff liaison. So put together an RFQ. We identified 6 potential firms to send that RFQ to. And we sent that out, gave them a date in which to respond. Once that date was arrived at, we had responses from 3 of the 6. I got notice from the 4th one that even though they would have liked to have responded, they did not wish to take on municipal work at this time and were going to stay in the private sector, and 2 did not respond at all. So I do have 3 responses that I will put together a summary of their qualifications and so forth as identified in the RFQ, and I will be presenting that then back to the subcommittee here shortly. So that's where we stand on that. And then ultimately that would go to council, but right now it's still at the subcommittee level and then ultimately to this committee level. So that ball's in my court to summarize it and get it to folks. Mr. Chair, it looks like Mrs. Dodwell has a question.
Yes, go ahead, Katie.
Would your summary come to our subcommittee first for discussion or go directly to council?
No, actually the summary will go to the subcommittee consisting of Mr. Garitano, Ms. Edens, and the mayor. Then it would come back to this committee, the admin and PW committee, for you all to review and so forth before it ever goes then on to council.
And with that summary, would their information be available for review online so that we could maybe dig in a little bit further if we had questions or anything, or how would that work?
My goal was to take the information they provided and put it in written form. But I mean, in some sort of an electronic document that you could certainly review that would answer each of the questions that were identified in the RFQ about their qualifications and who they've represented and all the questions that were part of the RFQ. So I would provide that for each of the three firms that responded, so that you can compare and contrast each of the three then.
Perfect. Sorry, I had to go on mute. The dogs were barking. Appreciate that, Steve. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. And then, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll then address item number 3, which is the electric vehicle charging stations. And Mr. Brown can jump in and fill in anything that I may have left out. The update to that project is that we are still waiting for the initial contractor that was given to us by Ameren. We're waiting on pricing. Those folks came out, met with Mr. Brown, and looked at the garage and looked at power sources, et cetera. While we are waiting for the pricing from that firm, Mr. Bartoni reached out to me and asked if he could pass along a name of someone that he works with in his line of business. And we certainly said, certainly. And so he passed along a name. The company is Newmeyer Equipment Company, and they are in this space, from pumps at gas stations, which is why Mr. Bartoni knows of this individual, to electric vehicle charging stations, commercial side, private side, et cetera. So Mr. Brown and I sat through a Zoom meeting with them. Personally, I was very impressed with them, with what they are currently doing and so forth. So they had sent information. They are working on pricing. Then what Mr. Brown and I intend on doing then is, once we get pricing from both the firms, summarize that all into a document and then bring that back to the committee. And hopefully we'll have that fairly soon. I'm confident that that we will get the pricing from the second firm that we just recently spoke to fairly quickly, because they followed up with some additional information right away. The first firm has been dragging their feet a little bit, but that's okay. We're still waiting for some information from Ameren as well. And again, our goal is then to summarize that and get it back to the committee just as soon as we can. It'd be nice if I could say that we would do it at the September meeting, but I don't want to commit, because right now it's a little out of our control, Mr. Brown and I, in terms of when we will get that pricing. But we're still moving it forward. It's not languishing. We are pushing and waiting to get that information. Rick, do you have anything else that you would like to add on that particular topic?
No, sir. I think you covered it very well.
Okay. Mr. Chair, unless there's any questions, that would cover the 3 items under admin for information, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
May I ask a question, please? I don't know how to raise my hand, guys. This is Rob.
Yeah, Councilmember Rambo, it's very simple, either the left or the right arm, just put it over your head. But anyway.
You don't have my musculoskeletal difficulties, and we'll leave it at that. But and you didn't have to give blood today. But anyway, my question is a real simple one. I thought the original firm responded quickly with some very detailed pricing. Did we change the scope of work or the specs? I know we were looking at other locations and whatnot. What does the hang up seem to be?
I'm going to let Rick answer that question, because he was dealing directly with that particular firm. Rick, if you don't mind, and with the chair's permission.
Yeah. So I've got a secondary number from IBP, which was the first firm that we spoke to regarding their costs, but we are still waiting on numbers from Ameren. There are some additional costs involved from Ameren potentially to get the power, the higher voltage to potentially the location. So that's the holdup right now is Ameren. It's not IBP, although they were a little bit delayed relative to, it seemed to me, relative to the initial request getting the numbers to me, but I do have them from them at this point.
Okay, yeah, I have no horse in the race. I just they seemed prompt and responsive, initial contacts, and then to hear that they're dragging their feet, it was a little disconcerting. But I'm confident you're on top of it. So thanks for the update.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, Councilmember Brost, I think you had something you wanted to say, right?
Yeah, have we determined the location, or is that going to be part of the, part of their proposal is also recommending locations?
That would be part of the proposal and the information that it is my hope that Mr. Brown and I would bring back to this committee. Obviously, one of the locations is inside of the parking garage back in the corner. That would be the northeast corner of the parking garage, lower level by the stairs. That is one location. There are pros and cons to that, but we are also looking at a location on Main Street, perhaps across the street from City Hall, which also has a source of power and might be a little more visible and might provide some benefits, perhaps at a location in the garage might not. So there's pros and cons to that one as well. But we did have a conversation with this second provider in terms of where they typically place them. Do they need to be covered? I mean, we learned more than we wanted to know about charging stations and how robust they are and how rain and sleet and snow and hammers and anything else can't affect them and so forth. So Mr. Brost, we would be presenting a couple potential locations for consideration by this committee.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I don't see any other hands up. So Steve, that's a good update on those three items there. So we'll proceed to the next part of the agenda. So we have two items under the for action. The first item is a continuation of what was discussed at the last meeting. So either City Administrator Cross, or if not, it's the City Attorney that would speak to the new information that was put together for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you are correct that Mr. Young is going to handle this part of the agenda.
And there he is.
Take it away, John.
Thank you, Stephen, members of the committee. So I sent out, or came with your packet, was a memo kind of detailing the different procedures that could be followed in the selection of chairs of standing committees. But I want to point in that memorandum to the last page, which includes kind of a flow chart that identifies how these different procedures could occur. And again, based on the direction from the committee at the last meeting, we're starting with the roll call vote procedure. So in the flow chart, that was assumed to be the starting point. And the concept would be, after one or more inconclusive votes under the roll call vote procedure, meaning that no one candidate received sufficient votes for election, we would then go to one of four procedures. One is the acting chair continues, and you just keep doing it over and over and over again. The next process is, after, say, 2 roll call votes, you still don't have a majority, and you have more than 2 candidates, you drop the lowest vote getter off. Third option is you move immediately to a viva voce election, which we've discussed at some detail, and it was provided in prior memoranda. And then lastly, an option of a coin toss. Now, before anybody thinks, well, that seems like an incredibly arbitrary way to handle such an important decision, Councilmember Brost may recall that in fact is an acceptable means of deciding an election for council member, according to the St. Louis County Election Authority. So it is an accepted method, and we've actually provided even guidance on proposed language in the memorandum of how the coin toss. I gotta stop drinking before meetings. How the coin toss could be conducted. So again, we've set forth a flow chart, and you can decide to go as deep or shallow in the rabbit hole as you want in this flow chart. So if you say, no, we're going to just go to roll call, drop the lowest 2, and then keep doing roll call until we get it, that's fine. you can do that. If you want to do drop the lowest and then go directly to viva voce, that's fine. It's however you would like to do it, but I wanted to give you examples of how it could play out. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, and is everybody still clear on the difference between, I guess, roll call and viva voce before we get into any questions, or do we need clarification on that? So, all right, John, thanks for going through this and providing the explanation on this. So are there any questions or any comments from anybody, especially, since you did start having discussions on this at the last meeting,
Yeah, Joe, John, to your point, I think the coin toss, I don't know. I think in my case, it was provided the two candidates agreed. Would that be the same condition if for some reason the committee wants to go that way?
It can be. That's up to the committee. The committee can require it as after so many votes, but the committee could also leave it up to the candidates as well.
Okay, but the state law provides for it without the candidate agreeing to it.
State law provides that it would be done by draw or re-election. So it was ultimately up to the candidates. If the candidates wanted a second election, the candidates were entitled to a second election under state law as it related to the election of council member. And as you'll recall, in your circumstance, it was your opponent that insisted on a second election.
Okay,
right.
so, but the flexibility is there. You might bring closure should a vote
Correct.
drag out.
Okay, Councilmember Edens, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so just to be clear, so tonight you're looking for guidance for which path on the flow chart we want to follow, or we're leaving them all open. I mean, the second column, going from the left, at first it seems like it's the longest, but it actually is somewhat simple because you're continuing with the same method for a while you're dropping people. And then if it doesn't work out, you still have two other ways to protect the committee's time if there's a tie between two candidates. So I actually think starting with if more than two candidates drop the lowest vote getter, roll call / viva voce, followed by the coin toss, provides the most protection, and actually, as long as people continually understand what it means to do the roll call vote, then I think it would make sense to a lot of people, because then they're understanding that you keep doing the same process and dropping names, especially if you just say it's like the Pope. I think it makes a lot of sense to people. So are you looking for a motion for a specific path? Or we don't need that at all because we've already decided that we're doing a roll call and all of these are open to us?
In terms of, as I had mentioned previously, to implement these procedures will require a code amendment.
Okay.
Because we're effectively deviating or providing deviation from Robert's Rules of Order. So what I would suggest is, yes, asking for direction so we can prepare the appropriate documentation.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to proceed with language that incorporates the flow chart with the second column from the left.
Right, so, and before maybe we entertain that motion, I would like to make a comment there and just kind of throw something out there, just for food for thought and see if that matters. So would you be okay, Councilmember Edens, if you just held off on that one, and then I'll let you come back and make that motion? Again, I don't know whether this will impact it or not. So I agree. I am a big fan of the roll call being the first one. And the reason I say that is I think it provides the most fairness, because the viva voce really puts that in the hands of whoever is the acting chair. And so if they have a preference on one person over another to let that motion go first, they're going to likely give that motion a first shot. And so someone who may not someone may not get the fair shot there at getting there. So roll call, I think, is very good there. I'm not I'm not a fan of via voce. I would hope it's done with a roll call. The only thing with the coin toss that I do worry a little bit about is, and again, it's something that I think I'm more interested, if you think it matters and it makes a difference, is that, if there's people, I guess if that would be if there's a split vote, right? We're going to do a coin toss. So in the case of where you have maybe some council members who are not at the meeting for some reason, if someone just can't make the meeting, or two people can't make it technically to give us the tie, then you're stuck with a tie vote, and then basically the coin decides. And to me, that's just a question. Do we allow that to do that, or do we wait till the next meeting where we get the full committee together to make the vote happen? So I don't know that I can say I have a preference, but I see that's potentially a very limited scenario that could occur.
Can I?
Yeah, I'm open to your thoughts.
I think that I understand what you're saying. I'm thinking back to some experiences we've had since we've been on council. My only comment is by the next meeting, maybe one person that had been there to vote before was going to be out of town and couldn't make the next meeting, and then you might end up in a perpetual couple of months in a row without a chair. That would be my only concern. And there might be a way for John to put that in the language that if
there would be the acting chair. The acting chair, I think, but according to John's definition, is actually whoever's the first person, I think, on the list, which sounds like it'd be the Ward 1 person. If that is correct, John, I'll let you clarify. Lauren, sorry to cut you off if there was anything else that you wanted to add.
Well, to answer your question first, it is the first person named in the list of appointees by the mayor. Does that necessarily mean it will be the Ward 1 person? Not necessarily. If the mayor just goes by ward number, as historically has been done, not knowing about this process, then yes, that could happen. But I would say, knowing about this process, there will be a little bit more intent in the order. And now the second thing is, do recall that if you do not have a sufficient majority, or you don't have everybody there, and you want to wait until everyone's there, you still have the opportunity for a motion to postpone.
Got it.
Yeah. So I'd still like to go ahead and make my motion. And then John, I just have one legal question. What happens if the acting chair just refuses? Does it move to the next person until someone agrees? Or do we need to explicitly state that?
I'm sorry, the acting chair refuses what? To serve as chair for purposes of the first meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would hope that if the mayor is going to name that person, the mayor will confirm with that person that they're willing to do it.
Weirder things have happened, because that could.
Oh, that's true. But I would say that generally what's going to happen is you're going to have the next person in line do it.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so I'd still like to make the motion then that we kind of move down the second column. So continuing to weed out people with less votes, and then we move to something else if we're stuck with a tie.
Councilmember Bertolino, you had your hand up next. Is
I'll
that a
wait for a
second to
second.
that?
Yeah, Joe, can I wait for a second on Lauren's motion, and then I want to talk to the motion.
Okay, is there anyone that wishes to second the motion that Lauren made? So Councilmember Hopper, and again, the motion is looking at that path on the chart that is roll call. And then if there are one or more inconclusive votes, it would be removing the lowest vote getter if there are more than two candidates. And then there would be either a roll call vote or a viva voce. And lastly, a coin toss if that doesn't work. So that's motion. We've got a first and a second by Edens and then Hopper. So Dave, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. My only comment is, folks, that if we are in a situation that is so contentious that we have this tie, that I think looking long-term, a solution to breaking that tie is not an arbitrary coin toss. It is forcing the members of the committee to basically battle it out and concede one way or the other so that you have a duly elected chair of the committee. A coin toss, in my mind, would lead to someone who secures the position of chair through pure chance. And that's always going to leave a bit of a bad taste in the mouth of those who didn't get their candidate on to the chairmanship. So that's an extreme case, but to that end, I think, Lauren, I prefer the first one where we just keep roll call voting until we get a candidate elected and not go to a coin toss.
Okay, Dave, Lauren, do you want to respond to that or?
Yeah, so the only problem is, Dave, that's not on the flow chart, right? So if you
Well,
see, there isn't one where you just continually do the same thing after, and I mean, there is, but I guess you would just stick with the acting chair, but.
If I may, Joe, I believe the far left one, Lauren, is with the acting chair just continues until a majority vote is acquired.
But then it ends in a, okay.
To your point, it ends at the end of the meeting. People say, I'm tired of voting. The acting chair continues on, and let's bring this up at the next meeting. I think that's the way it would go. And
So John, do you want to confirm that since you authored this? Is that the intention that that first path on the far left would be the way that the scenario is just played out?
It can, yes. And I do want to be clear, as I mentioned before, at any of these, at any option, you can stop at any level. So for example, in the second one we're discussing, if you just want to eliminate the coin toss from that, you can do that. And again, to Councilmember Brose comment, you could put in a caveat that is only if the two candidates agree. Otherwise, you can continue to do it.
Dave, you want to follow up on that?
Joe, to that, thank you, John. To that end, Lauren, would you object to amending your motion to that effect, that the coin toss is only by mutual consent of the two highest vote getters?
Can I think about it and hear from somebody else? Only because if both people object, then you're stuck in a loop forever and ever, and I don't know how to get out of the loop. I was just looking for something that has finality as a nuclear option. Because, I mean, you remember what some things were like before, and if the balance had been a little bit different, I don't know that you would have ever had a group of people that would have put their differences aside and said, you know, okay. And if one person would switch to break a tie, I think the disgruntlement would be just as bad as it would be as with a coin toss, because I think that there would be so much resentment. With one person switching a vote, it would actually have just as much strife as a coin toss. So I'll think about it. Suppose I'd still vote for it if it was amended, but.
Ethan, you had your hand up. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually agree with Councilmember Edens on this one. I think, and especially Mr. Young, if you kind of had explained a little bit there too, that we have options to stop in the process along the way to go as far as we feel comfortable with. But I also agree that you have an opportunity to exhaust those battling it out options in the first couple of places where you're doing your roll call votes. And kind of going through those iterations of that, you sort of have that battling it out. But I agree with Councilmember Edens that it's nice to have at least something there that is the last ditch effort. We're not going to come to terms. People are dug in, and a lot of times you get people that once they get dug in, they're just never going to change their mind, because now it's just become a point of principle in their minds that they're like, I'm not switching no matter what. So I think having an option there that says we're going to remove the people from it and get a resolution to this so we can move forward. Like Lauren said, it's going to be, you're going to have, bad feelings one way or the other if it's really that contentious that it goes all the way to a coin toss. So I don't think how it gets decided is going to probably alleviate that very much. But like I said, I support it as it is and kind of as it stands, that, at some point you sort of have to have that finality out that says we've got to decide this and it just has to be done.
I don't see any other hands up. Maybe I'll ask John. John, you've got some experience working with other cities, and I apologize if this came up at the last meeting, so just let me know. We already discussed this. But John, based on what you've seen in other cities, and obviously each city has numerous committees, what path is the most common one that you see out there?
The most common one I actually see is the viva voce approach, because you typically would get some level of certainty early on. That's typically what I see. And oftentimes it's not codified or put into rule. It's just how they've always done it, and it seems to work out okay. Now, does that mean that it's without some form of dissension or controversy? No, but that's the most common way I've seen it.
Joe, you haven't seen my hand. It's been up for like 15 minutes now.
Rob, I watched the last admin PW. I noticed even Dave couldn't see a hand, so it's not a chair problem. I wanted to mention that. I did notice that the last time. All right, go ahead.
So I agree with both Dave and Lauren. They make excellent points. The reason for this, the original rationale, was to make it a completely neutral process and not give advantage to the incumbent chairperson. And we've done good work to get past that. But I don't know, in engineering or in programming, actually, there's an escape or a branch. And if we could have like 2 iterations of the roll call and then go to the whatever would be the most useful way to break the tie. People object to the coin toss. That does make it is reasonable to try to avoid that, but I don't see anything other than endless iterations of the same failed process of roll call that's going to break a tie. And so I'm not clear that there's a solution, but I just wanted to make another stand in favor of the roll call vote initially rather than viva voce, because it doesn't it leaves some power in the hands of the existing chair or the incumbent chair. That's all I wanted to say.
Joe Garitano, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I would just echo what Rob said about the viva voce. It just kind of leaves some power there for whoever's facilitating to choose which motion to move forward with. All right, well, we've got a motion on the floor here, and we've got what we would be a roll call, and hopefully that would take care of it the first time. So if it's a tie or inconclusive, then by removing the lowest vote getter, hopefully that frees up some votes if it's 3 or more people that are more than 2 people running. And then just to clarify, in this path here where it says roll call vote or viva voce, is that a decision made by the committee as to which one happens at that point, or do we need to make it clear?
What I'm hearing and what I would intend to do, Mr. Chairman, is to continue with the roll call vote, because that seems to be the preference.
All right, and I'll just ask if there's any objections to that from the committee, that path just be clarified. So there is another roll call. So we've freed up any lowest votes if it's 3-way. And then in that case, if there is still an inconclusive vote at that point, then is that clear? Then the next step is the coin toss, or Or is it something else or at the next meeting, John?
Well,
Well,
Mr. Chair, couldn't you, and John, couldn't you, it's just not like there's one roll call vote. You could do several, because somebody may just ultimately change their mind. So I guess you could do as many until the committee decides, okay, we're done. And then, so it's not just one more after dropping the lowest vote getter. It could be 3 or 4 or 10, depending on how many people want to go. Is that right?
Yeah.
Not correct, John?
my intention would be that you would have at least 2.
Okay.
So you can make sure that give someone an opportunity to change their vote on with now the lower number of candidates. Now, obviously, if there were initially only 2 candidates in the first place, you still go down that route. Now, and again, there's a million different ways to skin this thing. And one of them could be that the coin toss is only upon a vote to have a coin toss. And you keep going that process until there's a vote. Someone make a motion for a coin toss, or leave it to the discretion of the chair, which from what I'm hearing, nobody wants to have happen. I don't know what you've done, Mr. Chairman, but apparently they just don't want to give you too much power.
I don't want it. No, I just want to make sure we're very clear what's the automatic trigger for the coin toss. So that
And
this
again, I
is
guess that
very
is a
clear.
question is, does the body want an automatic trigger, or do they want to have it be done only upon the decision or even the consent of the candidates?
Nathan, you got a comment?
I
on
think
that?
a trigger. I vote a trigger. It gets us out of an endless loop, and it solves the problem. I don't think we'll ever wind up getting there to that point, but that would keep the process perfectly neutral, and no one has an advantage by virtue of incumbency, which was the rationale behind this in the first place. So that's my comment.
All right, Nathan, you had your hand up.
I actually lean a little bit the different way, that I think it would defer down to, obviously the committee doing a vote and saying, okay, we've been doing this for 2 meetings, or we've been on here for 4 hours trying to decide this bad boy. Somebody make a motion and we can do a coin toss. And then I think it would, again, leave that to the committee to sort of make that decision. Would in my mind make more sense.
Okay,
But
Dave?
you could have,
Oh,
I mean, but there's rationale either way of whether it be maybe the trigger is, maybe there's a trigger that says you have to now vote to have a coin toss or something.
Dave, what do you think? Or John, do you want to comment on that first?
I was just going to say, you could have it where anyone could make the motion at any time, but after 5 votes, if it's inconclusive, it's automatic.
Got it. How about you, Dave?
I was going to say 3. We write it into the ordinance that after 3 tie votes, it is automatic triggered that we would go to a coin toss.
And if everybody's got their heels dug in, I don't know that the vote's going to change. If everybody stands firm, that you may end up with a tie on the coin toss decision.
No, not a decision. I was saying it's automatic.
Oh, you're saying just make it
After
happen.
3 votes of tie, it's automatic, as in the terms, it's a trigger. After 3 tie votes, it automatically goes to a coin toss.
Okay. Lauren, you got your hand up.
You just brought up a really good point that the vote for whether or not to do a coin toss could be tied, and in fact create even more of a time drain. So trigger it. I think Dave's option is great. I was going to be even less generous and say 2 tied votes, but 3 is fine. So that would be fine. I mean, unless you guys really want to have like a pageant show, or whoever has the quickest auctioneering voice is also a really good option for budget negotiations, just total auctioneering speed. So just some options, we could see everybody's best talent, but in lieu of talents, I agree with Dave.
Okay. So,
So, hey, Joe, this
yes?
is Larry. So if I understand it, then the first vote, there's a tie, and the low vote getter, if there's 3, drops off.
That's right.
Then you go to a second, And then if there's a tie with two candidates, then you go to a third. If there's a tie with two candidates, then there's a coin toss, is what's being suggested by Dave. Is that, am I hearing that right?
Dave is agreeing with you, so he is.
That's what I was proposing, yes.
Oh, I thought that the number of times only started counting for the same tie. So that it's when two candidates tie, there's 3 votes. You're saying when any tie occurs at all with any combination, that counts as 1 vote?
That's what I was thinking, yeah, just to expedite things.
Okay.
All right.
Joe, can I make that as a as an amendment to Lauren's
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's get that as an amendment there, and then, so, Carla, do you have that, or? You're on mute.
Yes, but we need a second on that amendment then.
Okay, so.
I'll
we have a
second it.
All right, Councilmember Bros seconded it. All right, any other questions or comments on that path? Otherwise, I'm gonna just make sure, does everybody understand it, or, you clear on what we're voting? It's that second column there with a counter that starts whenever we get a tie, that it goes up to 3 times the counter, and then at that point, then, if I hear it correctly, an automatic trigger goes in to the coin toss. Did I say that right?
Well, I think you'd have, so I think part of this too, I think in the phrasing is coming in, we're incorporating tie a lot, but some of that's going to be if they don't have, it could also be if we have 4 people and nobody gets a majority, it wouldn't necessarily be a tie, but we would just have a stalemate, I guess, in the election where not enough people had a majority. So, and then the lowest, so the first one would be nobody had a majority. If we had 3, then 1 person would drop off. The second one would be a tie. And then I don't know how the phrasing would be to make that the right count and stuff, but I think that's kind of where
Yeah, that's
the word tie may throw it off a little bit.
that. So inconclusive may be it, but if you have 3 people running, and let's say only 6 committee members show up, and each candidate for this role gets 2 votes, you can't drop any lowest vote getter. You got to tie across the 3, and so now I'm just playing out this scenario. How do we figure out when we do a coin toss with 3 people? Somebody's got to drop, or otherwise, if they don't want to drop, you're stuck with 3.
3 coin.
You need a 3
3 coin
coin,
is still a time coin toss.
3-sided coin that Rob has.
No, 3 coin. It's 3. I mean, if you go out to lunch with 2 other guys and you toss to see who pays, if 2 people flip heads and 1's tails, the tails guys win. It's still a coin toss.
You could do it
How it
that way.
works.
Then.
But then we'd need a 4-sided coin for something else. So.
Well, we might be thinking too much into this. I think we're maybe over analyzing a 0.01 probability here.
Yeah.
Sounds like the movie 3 Coins in a Fountain. My gosh, you guys.
Yeah. So we've got an amendment made by Dave, seconded by Larry there. Is there anything else that anybody's thinking about there? Or, obviously we've got this, it's going to go to council. So maybe somebody might want to sit there and do some computations. John can run the probabilities. And then at council, if there is an adjustment, we can certainly make that amendment there. All right, seeing none, let's vote on the.
I had my hand up.
Oh, Lauren, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, Councilmember Hopper articulated what I was trying to ask about when the number of votes started to count.
Yes.
With the difference between a majority versus a tie. So not the 2-2-2 scenario, but maybe like I'm still not sure I understand what when the strike starts and what I'm voting on. So can John please articulate that back to me? I just want to make sure I understand the motion as amended.
John, I hope math was your favorite subject.
I just don't understand when that first limit starts.
You're on mute, John.
To the chairman's comment, I actually tell people I went to law school because I was told there'd be no math involved. But my understanding of the process as of right now is that you would have potentially up to 2 initial roll call votes.
Okay.
And if there are more than 2 candidates, you would drop off the lowest vote getters.
Right.
And then you would have 1 more roll call vote.
Okay.
And if that again was inconclusive, you would have a coin toss. That was my understanding of the motion. Now, I am subject to being corrected, however, because I was not 100% clear.
So then that
Because I
doesn't
heard
give
3
anybody
total
another
votes.
chance to drop off then.
Right, I heard 3 total votes. Well, when you drop off, you drop it down to 2 candidates. And there are procedures in Robert's rules to make sure on how to do that.
Oh, okay.
Dave, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just a little clarification, John. I was thinking 3 tie votes. So in your case, there were 3 candidates and they get various votes, but the lowest one drops off. And then the next round of voting is a tie between the 2 remaining candidates. And then I was thinking that's the first tie.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do it again. Still a tie.
Okay.
That's the second tie, then the third tie, and we've had enough. Let's toss a coin.
Yeah.
Okay. So ultimately, there's potentially a total of 5 votes. The first 2 being before you drop the lowest vote getter off. And again, I only say that with giving someone an opportunity to change their
True.
vote when they hear
No,
the.
well, it would be. John, I'm saying there's 2 votes. There's 3 candidates. You take the vote. The 2 top vote getters, even if they're tied, are still going on to the next round. The lowest vote getter drops off. And then you have round 2, in which again, you may have the 2 remaining candidates may be tied.
Yeah.
Okay. And if it's tied a third time, then you go to coin toss.
Okay.
I think you just said 2
Yeah, I'm still a little
different
confused.
things. I think
that, sorry, if I could, Councilman Reeves, maybe I don't mean to interrupt. I'm cutting you off. I think we're saying the same thing, but I think the verbiage should be like, it's 3, maybe the verbiage should be like, there's maybe 2 votes or something. Once the trigger to your counter should be your first vote that only has 2 candidates. So say we have 10 people, everybody on the committee decides to run for chair and we're all voting, then it would, you could have 8 people voting, right? So you're really going to have 6 elections. Let's say that it went all the way through this process, that the lowest person would drop off, the lowest person would drop off. And then you'd work your way down to 2. And then once you had your top 2 people, those would start your tie, if I'm understanding correctly how this would work. And if I totally missed it, but I think your counter would start when you're down to 2 nominees running.
Right. Yeah. If I could, Joe, Nate, you said it correctly. I think if we say the verbiage in my amendment is when the election is down to 2 candidates who are tied, then after 3 votes on those 2 candidates, if there's still a tie, we flip the coin.
Okay, I understand it. I understand it now.
Okay.
All right. So I think that's still, the spirit of that is still in the amendment there, right? I don't think it needs to change.
If Carla's got the words.
Carla, do you?
I do have the amendment to say that, well, the whole thing together is proceed with the policy drafted inclusive of what I've right now called flowchart process number 2 with roll call vote path with 3 between 2 candidates tied votes. And then after that would result in a coin toss. So it's 3 tie votes between 2 candidates that are tied.
Little modification, and folks help me out. I think we were saying, if we end up after, say, the first round, there are 3 candidates. 2 of them have the same vote. The third one has maybe only 1 vote. The lower one drops out.
Right, that's inclusive in that pathway, right?
Yeah.
It's on
So
flow
we
chart.
end up- It should be the trigger for a potential coin toss starts when there are just 2 candidates who have tie votes. And we vote on those 2 candidates, if need be, 3 times. If there's no resolution after the third vote on those 2 candidates, then we go to a coin toss.
Okay.
Okay. So we got Dave that made that. Larry, you're still there, a second on that. So we've got the amendment there to it. So let's see, after all this good discussion here, I think, John, we're going to vote first on the amendment and then vote on the original motion, if I understand correctly, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so let's try voice vote on this and hopefully we don't have a tie. All in favor of the amendment made by Councilmember Bertolino and Bros, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, so the amendment is there. So now we're back to the original motion made by Councilmember Edens. And was that Nathan that seconded yep. So so we have the motion there. Carla, could you repeat that? Is that the second column there?
To proceed with the policy drafted inclusive of flowchart process number 2 with roll call vote path.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, so again, this is going to be, John is just going to tweak the final language of the change there. It'll go to council. We'll have time to review it before it goes to council. And obviously we can make sure that, you know, there's no issues with it. So good discussion there. Moving on, we're going to go to the next item on the agenda, which is the accessibility compliance and suggested improvements. So I'm going to link to the Administrator Cross. You prepared a memorandum here. And I think what we're looking for just out of this committee here, and Councilmember Clark is on with us as well. So she has asked us to provide some comments regarding this. So I'll let her speak after City Administrator introduces it. But I think at this point, what we're going to look for is just some action on this, whether to just again proceed with implementing as many of the items that can be accomplished within the current budget. That's what's noted in the memo there. So City Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're absolutely correct in terms of what we would be looking for in terms of action from the committee this evening. This memorandum you all saw at the last council meeting. And just to quickly summarize, this was brought up at a previous council meeting by Councilmember Clark and said that wanted the city to look into how we could do more in terms of providing accessibility. So as mentioned in this memorandum, Mr. Vunich, Mr. Brown, and myself did meet with Councilmember Clark and talked about a number of items. They were summarized in this memorandum. It was presented to the council at the last council meeting, and that at the end of that discussion, a motion was made to bring this to the committee for action. It is the intention of the city, as delineated in this email, to implement as many or all and more of these items as they are brought to the attention of the city, things that we can do. So this was just a start of the items that were discussed around the table at the time. And a lot of these things we can implement, or a number of these items we can implement fairly quickly, we believe, and some, might take a little bit more money from the budget perhaps, or some other things to look into. And pursuing, having conversations with other folks outside of the committee, the executive director of the Central Institute for the Deaf, as well as that person's counterpart with the St. Louis Society for the Blind or the Missouri School for the Blind. So the action, again, that we would be looking for is basically a go-ahead for the city to start work and whittling away on the items on this. And then I would just add the caveat that as other items that anyone on this committee or any of the council members feel that they would want to add to this document and have the city look into, we're wide open. This is not just a one and done. This is something that we'll be improving upon and doing, probably for the the life of the city. There's always going to be evolving issues. So anyway, that is what we would be looking for from this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. I appreciate so much the meeting that City Administrator Cross and others had regarding this disability issue. But we have to remember there are always going to be new rules and regulations added to our planning as better ideas come forward, and as we recognize different things that are needed, and we have to recognize what our needs are in the city. The city constantly is updating and working on their methods and improving them and all of their activities within their projects, but we still miss things. And for example, at the Music on Main, we were there and we had fulfilled our checklist of getting the toilets for even the disabled that were the size that someone in a wheelchair could use. But there was a resident there in a wheelchair, and I was talking with him, and he said, the problem is those toilets are all on the grass. And he said the ground is very soft. There's no way he could ever get over to the toilet. So that's just an example. I'm not criticizing, because those are things that we will see if we don't look sideways. If we just look forward and backwards, we're going to see things, but we just have to look outside of what we think is normal. And some of that's going to take utilizing people who are disabled and getting their opinions and using those instead of what we think would be the best way to do it. I would suggest not only to just do the list of check these things off, but it's more of a philosophy, a way of thinking, and just to consider, some people have suggested a task force to develop a set of maybe ever improving standards. It's not a set standards that we would have, but ever improving or continually improving standards that address projects from the get-go, from the concept stage, and throughout the development and additions and renovations and whatever we do within the projects. So this would all be included in the presentations of the projects when it goes to council. And we need to set up guidelines that we have, and we have guidelines within the city. I realize that, and we meet ADA, and we try really hard to do all of those things. But if I can walk around the city and see a number of things that we wrote down on the list, I'm sure people with disabilities see a lot more than I saw. Not that I don't have disabilities, because I do. But in addition to consulting with people with disabilities, I think we need a list of current specific standards that, of course, this would be an ever-changing document too, that would serve as a baseline checklist such as what you have on the document that City Administrator Cross made out. And we need a database that we can implement all the complaints and the problems that we encounter and our ideas of things that we can implement to make it better, not to reinvent the wheel, not to go in and completely develop and build new things that are outside of anything that anyone else is doing, but to have sort of a plan, do, checklist so that we can see what we've done, how we did it, and if it worked. If it didn't, we won't do it next time. But if we continually if we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we always got, so to speak. So that would be an evaluation of what, or a measurement of how well we were doing. Also, maybe develop a vocabulary worksheet or vocabulary, just a page that gives some ideas about what is appropriate at this time in history, appropriate verbiage, so that we aren't offending people as we talk about disabilities, because it's easy to do. I know, personally that many people still say deaf and mute or deaf and dumb or hearing impaired. And the correct terminology would be deaf and hard of hearing, so we don't hurt someone's feelings. We would not say someone is mentally retarded anymore. Those kind of things, if we just had a simple sheet that gave us a little bit of an idea before we get into public council meetings or this meeting, and we're talking about it publicly, so we don't offend. Because I'm sure that I say things myself that I would like to know to not say. There's a lot of state and federal agencies and organizations and government, groups that already have a lot of information that would help us set up these standards. For example, Special School District in St. Louis deals with people with disabilities all the time. And they already know a lot of things that we don't know. So we could get a lot of help from them. I would use caution if we're going to get consultation from private groups or private schools for the deaf, schools for the blind, because they can be biased in their philosophy and leave out a great number of people with disabilities that don't have their same philosophy. So I would be more inclined to get consultation from non-biased groups, maybe state organizations or public organizations. So I would just ask that you as a group consider further discussion and further development on pursuing some of these things that I've outlined.
Thanks, Teresa. Maybe I can, just hearing the excellent presentation you made here, just offer some comments here. So, and looking at the memorandum here, there's some items that, when I look at, like, for example, the pin sticker program, and forgive me, I'm not familiar with it, but I see something that this is already something that's in existence and maybe an easy, quick program that we could promote. And so I think there's some quick wins that are probably easy to do. And some of them are, on the other hand, a little bit more bigger lifts. Like when I see item number 3, replacing narrow sidewalks with wider wheelchair friendly, I don't know what that scope entails, because we've got a lot of sidewalks and would probably refer to Rick. And I'm going to assume that might require some cost. But I think one of the items that really struck me here that, and you mentioned this because you used the example of the person in the wheelchair and how we need to do things with input from people, is number 4, the survey. I think that is something, and this ties into, I had not yet spoken with City Administrator Cross, but the city last, if I recall correctly, conducted a major citizen survey. When I say major, a citizen-wide survey back in 2015, April of 2015. I've got the report. It's 55 pages. I don't think we've done one since then. And I think we're overdue for the survey is very comprehensive. It covers a lot of topics. So it's not specific just to this. And I don't know, don't know if that even covered anything regarding accessibility. But I think it would be really good if we're going to start. Let's get that input from the residents so we could prioritize what is most important. Like where is, just like you said, the example of, hey, if we person, we got the wheelchair accessible toilet, but getting to it was a problem. You said if we heard from people, we could do that. So I would think that, and I was going to ask City Manager Cross that we probably want to add this to the next agenda, because the survey that we conducted back in 2015 had 701 responses from citizens. And so that was, back in our early days before we even got into social media and where I had the website as robust as it is today. But I would think that if we're going to go out to residents to get input, that we can put a component in there regarding accessibility, because I think it would be really good to get a lot of that. Number 4 to me is probably developing a survey for the city's residents. I think is the most important thing before we start to do anything, to understand what it is that the residents want. And then I think that would help in telling us where we need to devote our attention to, where are the accessibility needs that are going to be the first priority, so that we could address those. And again, not excluding anything you have on the list here, but just trying to figure out where do we start, because it is a big lift overall looking at it together. So those are my thoughts here. And again, I was going to suggest that to City Administrator Cross. We talk about it, the City of Wildwood survey. Back then they called it the City of Wildwood Internet Survey. But that's what I think of when I see this, and having heard you speak about today. City Administrator Cross, you have your hand up. I've got Katie and then Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things. First of all, I think the survey is a very, very powerful tool, and would anticipate gathering a whole lot of very valuable and helpful information. The last survey that we actually did had related to the Village Green, and the responses that we got with regards to what residents wanted to see in the Village Green was a tremendous, and we did that over a series of surveys. So clearly the residents of Wildwood pay attention to that. We do have the social media, and we have avenues to send it out through SurveyMonkey or whatever vehicle we choose to use. But the residents of Wildwood appreciate it and engage very, very well. And we saw that. I don't remember the numbers, but the response that we got on the Village Green was tremendous. So that's a very powerful tool. With regards to the PIN program, again, you had mentioned that this was something that was already in place. I heard about it, and this actually was prior to our meeting with Councilmember Clark. I had a meeting with the captain, and we covered a number of topics, but I asked about the PIN program. He said that they had it, but they really hadn't been using it. And but once I asked him to move forward with that and so forth, for those of you that are on social media on Facebook, you may have noticed recently that the St. Louis County Police are posting on social media the use of the PIN program. And so there's colored stickers. And so the captain provided a lot of information in terms of the kinds of stickers. He gave me an example of a sticker. There's a sticker key, that identifies the color of the sticker. for what the sticker represents. That information is not public knowledge, but it is for the officers, because ultimately that's what this pin sticker program is all about, is when an officer approaches a vehicle or a home, there is a sticker, and the color of that sticker, be it yellow or purple or red or whatever, identifies what the situation may be, and it will help that officer when they approach that vehicle or that home, how to potentially interact with that individual. So they are using this now. And so again, you talk about something that, excuse me, something that is low hanging fruit and easily to implement. Our Wildwood precinct is now using this sticker program. And lastly, Mr. Garitano, and then I'll shut up here. You had mentioned about something about me coming back to the committee or adding something to the next agenda. And I'm not quite sure I fully understand what it is that you wanted to add to the next agenda. So I apologize for that. If you could clarify that for me, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll clarify that anyway. So the survey I mentioned, I'm well aware we've had numerous surveys since then, but they're very focused, very targeted. And that's certainly something that if the committee wants to proceed with a very focused accessibility survey, then I think that's nothing I'm married to. I do think, it's a different conversation, a comms conversation, but where we can consolidate sometimes surveys and try to hit our residents fewer times, I think will at some point help us versus doing numerous, which actually every time we do a survey costs money when we do these postcards and so forth. So that's to clarify that. And so this was I think a more comprehensive survey back then in 2015 that really dug into a lot of things. Like it asked residents, just you name it, how do you rate snow removal in the city? How do you rate economic success? It really gives you a comprehensive view of our residents of what it is. And so I was just proposing that, hey, we need to come back to looking at this, because I think there's a lot of council members who may not even be aware that this document exists. So that was one avenue. And if we want to go down an avenue of a very targeted survey, I think that's certainly up for discussion. And again, the pin sticker program, I just picked that out. That's just an example of just quick wins. I think those are we don't need to spend hours debating something that is quick and easy to implement, that's low cost. I mean, that's like a no-brainer. I think those should just be done unless there's an obvious reason for not doing those. And I'm surprised, like in some cases, maybe we're not doing them already. So that's it. But I think the key thing to me, if we're going to target, which I think this is a great list. There's some that I guess we need more information to understand. And I think that's something you can pursue, City Administrator Cross. But I would definitely suggest, let's start with a good survey. Let's get some good information, some good data that tells us where it is, because I think it's good to hear from the city residents, especially those that have accessibility needs. Where do they want us to focus on? Because that's going to translate to success for us, right? That when we implement that, then we know we have met a need that's highly desired, and certainly keep working our way down a list there. So those are my comments there, but I will hand it over to Council Member Dodwell. Then I've got Dave Bertolino, Lauren Edens, and Teresa Clark. Katie?
Hi, thank you very much, Teresa, for putting your foot forward and getting this topic on the table with both Joe and both Joes and our city administrator as well. As you were going through all of this, and I was reading over the list earlier, I think item number 6 on the list here, developing a list of resources for residents with disabilities. I think we're already working on that with the Committee for Community Outreach. I think we've got a lot of resources that we have that we're pulling together in that group that has a lot of different handicapped accessibility types of resources included in it along with other things. So we may want to look at how that particular document or that database is developing and see how we can use that. But I also like the fact that all of these items should be able to be included in part of our planning process for any development that we're getting ready to put together. We should be able to have, if somebody's building a new building in town center or anywhere, there should be, as part of the building code, components included in it that allow for wheelchair access in it. And that should just be part of the building code. I don't know if we have that at this time or not. We should have the ability to, on our street codes, have that information dictated by our street codes. I don't know if we have that in it or not. So I think if in all of our subcommittees or our council committees, we ask as we meet whether we have components within our building codes, within our planning codes that include things that allow those with various accessibility needs to be able to do those, be able to have the services that they need. I think that's a basic adjustment that we could make from the get-go right now, don't you think, folks? I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that. And then on the TTY item number 10, I think most of our equipment that we currently have in place and the phone systems that we have should be able to do those options already. And with the communication systems that we have put in place, as I recall looking at many of the details on our phone systems previously, those should have TTY capabilities built into them. I just don't know if we've implemented those for hearing impaired individuals. So just a little bit of information from past activities that I've had with some of the previous vendors that we've had in-house. That's all.
So thank Katie, and I've got a couple of hands up. I'm going to let City Administrator Cross speak. But I think too, and that's what's in the memo here is, and it sounds like if we get, continue to get a consensus with this, that maybe that's what the city administrator will start to look at these items. And again, my emphasis is really putting a survey first, but looking at these items to see what can be done and within the budget there. So we'll let Council Member Bertolino, Edens, and Clark speak. But Katie, I think we got the, he dropped off there, but I think that's definitely the spirit there. So City Administrator Cross, do you want to follow up with Katie there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, if that's okay, if as each committee member speaks, if they are raising a question, if I can answer it and raise my hand, I'd like to respond if that's okay. So with regards to committee member Dodwell's statements with regards to building codes and so forth, that we talked a lot about that at the meeting with Councilmember Clark. I mean, absolutely every building that is built, there are very, very, very stringent codes, ADA codes, et cetera. And Mr. Brown's on this call, and I'm certainly going to let him weigh in here. But everything that we do and any consultant that we do is absolutely up to speed. It's an absolute requirement to meet all those codes, either current or anything that they know that is coming down the pike. So nothing gets built from sidewalks to buildings to anything without absolutely being looked at with current ADA codes, and all those kinds of things. With regards to our phone equipment, we have very old phone equipment. At some point in time, it is my hope to be able to replace this old legacy system with a voice over IP system that has significant functionality. But you're absolutely right. You know, there may be some TTY functionality with the phone system, but it hasn't been used. So again, it's on the list simply to see if we actually have the hardware and the software that will allow for that. But as important, that we have the training and we provide that functionality and let our residents know that they can call in, that there is a way to receive a call over a TTY device and that it will be routed appropriately. But Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, I think it would be helpful if Rick were able to speak much more eloquently than I about building codes and the things that we need to follow, and in fact incorporate a little bit more review, as noted in number 9 about the planning review, as we're going and looking at each of these projects. But if with your permission, I think Rick could speak a little bit too.
Yeah, and I would say, and hopefully there's no objection from the committee, I think the key thing here is really just, bringing this topic to the attention of the committee, this list here. And so not to get caught into the extreme details of the codes themselves, but, that might be something that's even more appropriate in other committees there.
And I just want to state, maybe even putting a short article or two into either the Wildwood Gazette or on our weekly e-newsletter to let residents know in simple text or in simple ways that the city is doing these things. The city does have requirements that maybe our residents don't even know are occurring, but by making a big picture 2 or 3 paragraph discussion about what the city is doing, they will have a better understanding of the efforts that are being made and the strict guidelines that must be followed in order to build or assist or do business in the city of Wildwood. I think some residents may not have that understanding. Sorry, Rick.
No problem, Steve. Did you want me to say a few things?
It's with the permission of the chair if he wants to go down that road or not.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Rick, if you want to provide.
Well, the only thing I would add, the question was relative to the current code. So buildings that are constructed in Wildwood, and we defer that review to St. Louis County. So those folks, we do rely on their expertise in checking building plans. And that's one of the key things that they'd be looking for is accessibility being met current to the current guidelines that are out there. There is a U.S. agency called the United States Access Board, which is very active in promulgating requirements for ADA. And I'm more familiar from it with regard to the public right-of-way, not so much buildings. But for any roadway projects where we're impacting the public right-of-way or any trail projects where we're impacting the public right-of-way, the U.S. Access Board has developed a guideline that is utilized throughout the country, but more locally by St. Louis County and MoDOT, that incorporates the code requirements that we have to follow. So St. Louis County, MoDOT have adapted standard drawings details that meet that document. And that's kind of where it plays out. It starts at the federal level and those standards are incorporated at the county level and the state level. And then our consultants follow those standards when they put the plans together. And there's also other checklists that have been developed primarily at MoDOT that are very explicit relative to curb ramps and sidewalks and accessibility on the public right-of-way. So there's been quite a bit done relative to the public right-of-way that we do follow to try to get a curb ramp constructed in proper conformance. And finally, I will point out too, as far as public works goes, And we do have a project on our program for Manchester and Taylor to resurface those roads and upgrade the traffic signals. So when we do that project, and we do most projects, we're involving sidewalks. We look into curb ramps, making sure they're compliant with current standards, and then we'll upgrade the signals to be sure that we have ADA compliant crossings. So some places have more updated push buttons and detectors and verbal notification, those kind of things. We don't have those yet, but we will upgrade our signals so that they do incorporate those with that project when we're complete with it.
All right, thanks, Rick. All right, Dave, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly, I think we ought to move ahead with this. I would propose that at the next meeting, we take the items that have been developed here by Steve and by the input from Teresa and others, and make it an action item on our next meeting to prioritize these lists so that Steve and the committee, or the staff have direction, and then take that to the council at the meeting after that, and get something on the record that we're moving forward with these items. A survey, to me, guys, is not ready. We're not ready for a survey. I'm embarrassed to say that until Teresa Clark came on the council, the discussions about accessibility were almost zero. And that's speaking from almost 11 years of experience on the council. Teresa's done more in the last couple of years to bring awareness to the council. And I think that same lack of attention to accessibility is persistent. And that's why I would say throughout the city, that's why I would say that a survey of the citizens probably wouldn't yield much, in my opinion. I think the real people we need to go to are those who deal daily with accessibility and issues of that kind, the organization that here, and let them give us advice and counsel. But we should inform our citizens as to what we're doing and moving forward on this. So my proposal, Joe, is let's put this on the agenda for the next meeting to have a priority session on it, and then move that forward to the council to show them what we're doing.
Dave,
if that's a motion, I'll second it. It didn't sound like a motion, but I think it should be.
I didn't know if it needed a motion, I guess, Rob. I don't know. Joe?
well, Dave, do you want to, and it sounds like you want to strike number 4 from the list, the survey? You want to remove
No, I don't, because that's just me speaking. So
okay.
That's why I say, Joe, let's bring it back as a full discussion item and provide the time at our next meeting to thoroughly go through these. And the survey may be very, very valid. It's just my personal opinion that at this point, it's probably not going to be.
Okay. You want to hold then on making a motion then for now, or do you want to go ahead and do that? We have Councilmember Edens. That has her hand up,
Joe, does it take a motion, or is it just a good idea? And I suggested
I think once we get done here, I think it would be helpful, and I think a motion would be in line to continue to have the city administrator look into these items as far as implementation and come back to this committee with some additional information, because I think we're going to find out some we probably can make the decision quickly, and some like a sidewalk. I don't know what that's going to involve, how many miles of sidewalks we have, or what the areas are. And I think that might not even be ready by the next meeting. That might be something that might take a little more time to analyze. So we could ask them to look into it. And then the committee can either make the prioritizations here and decide which ones. And certainly, remember, the key thing is that it's within the current budget. So there might be some information we find out that it's just not possible within the budget we have planned, but we could start to think about that as we plan for the 2022 budget and going forward. So if that's what I just said is the spirit of your motion, or if you want to change it, I'll leave that to you.
No, and I guess I didn't say the words, but I will make a motion that the list as it currently exists that was provided by City Administrator Cross, I'd like to put that on our next agenda for this committee to prioritize those lists, or this list, and maybe add to or detract from based on that discussion. And then as the result of that meeting, we have a product to take to the council for their consideration and approval.
Okay. And that includes additional information to make that prioritization decision?
Absolutely, Joe. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second.
Before, and so we got Katie Dodwell making a second. City Administrator Cross, just to make sure, is that feasible for you, like to get this information and be able to bring it at the next meeting? Or, I just want to make sure being realistic with what you need in order to come back with good info for the committee here to look at.
So, Mr. Chair, if I understand you correctly, you're asking for me for these 10 items that are currently listed, to identify which ones are maybe the status of each one. Perhaps some are already implemented, some can be implemented at maybe a minimal cost within the 2021 budget, and those that are going to require more research and or need to go to another budget year, but at least to take a first stab at identifying the status of each of these. That what you're asking, Mr. Chair?
I think that would be what we want. Looking at a table that lists out these items, and then what potential time frame that could happen, and what potential. I think there's going to be some cost discussions that may need to be made. So, I think, some of it might be too early to decide going forward. So, but I do think the committee needs additional information. And Teresa, I know that you're an ex officio member of the committee here. So I want to make sure, since you're bringing this to the committee, is that what you had in mind as well? So.
Yes, it is, but I would like to, if there's time for me to explain a couple of these line items, just a bit more.
Okay, we'll come back then to you. So we've got the motion on the floor for now. And again, getting more information for the committee to look at the next meeting. Dave, you spoke already, so I'm assuming that is it. Lauren, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. It's just, I mean, we already know the status of a couple of these, and some of them I think we can recognize really quickly have little or no, sticker value, right? Like perfect example of that was the pen program. So I think what we should be doing tonight is to pick out those things now and to move forward with it, rather than just going in an endless loop of bringing it back to another meeting and then re-talking about that and prioritizing again when it's really low hanging fruit. And I do think it's still okay to do a survey for our residents and work with groups that have better expertise. And I say that because those groups have wonderful knowledge of best standards, but the citizens experience what it's like on a daily basis to live in our community and may have specific recommendations or locations that a person with professional knowledge wouldn't be aware of in our committee, because they're, again, not out there on a daily basis. And so I have to disagree that we aren't ready for that kind of survey knowledge. I certainly think that we are. The other thing that I think we can go ahead and do right now as a city is there are certain reporting forms that we already have, but there's individuals that should be responsible for reporting things first as a line of defense, right? The homeowner that has a sidewalk in front of their house that's completely buckling and makes it really hard for a person that can't lift their feet well to walk across or use a wheelchair. They should report that. If they don't do that, their HOA should be doing that. And then lastly, the citizen that experiences it should know to do that as well. So what we really want to start doing is promoting ways to make the city aware of the sidewalks with problems that already exist, because there is a reporting form for that, regardless of if we create some other reporting system for other types of issues. So the one thing I really want to narrow and drill down on, because I do believe it pertains to the motion, my understanding from Councilmember Dodwell that number 6, the list of resources for residents with disabilities, is already being worked on by the Community Outreach Task Force. Dan's not here to poll, but if that is correct, I would think it would be appropriate for that list to be forwarded to this committee and preferably to Teresa and Mr. Cross ahead of time before our next committee. If they haven't done enough work on it, I have no problem with the understanding that if Mr. Cross and Teresa look at this ahead of time and they say, you know what, there's really only 2 resources and there hasn't been enough work done, I want them to be charged with that, continue to do work before it comes back to the committee. We just talk about it at a surface level and reprioritize it when it has no monetary value and can be worked on by the time they have their next meeting. So yeah, and then I'm not done yet, but Mr. Cross had a comment. I think he did.
With the chair's permission, with regards to the community outreach task force, when we met, we being Mr. Vunich, Mr. Brown, Councilmember Clark and I, when this topic came up, I brought that up and I asked Mr. Vunich directly, who is the staff liaison for the COTF. His response was, this is not something that is being addressed by the COTF, that they are not developing resources like that, that we're talking about here as part of the thing that particular committee is working on. So this was identified as really kind of a separate list of resources. So that was the response that he gave to me with a direct question in that meeting that we had. So I will circle back just to confirm, but this list of resources is something that we will need to develop from ground zero and not rely on anything that potential the COTF was working on.
Okay, that's a big difference. So thanks for the clarity. So I'm not sure then if it makes sense to send it back there since we're already trying to cover everything conclusively here. The difference is you have citizens with maybe a broader level of experience that may be more aware of things in the community that I'm certainly not aware of. But I guess rather than just talking about it at the next meeting about developing a fact sheet, I don't want to put a lot on Councilmember Clark's plate, but I would certainly love it if instead of reprioritizing it, we had a draft of just using other available resources for that term etiquette sheet that she had mentioned, or just pulling together anybody that is aware of resources so that we can get a draft started. Because I want to make some progress between now and the next month and not just talk about it again. And the other thought I had is, in terms of that, I hate to say it, in terms of the terms, good Lord, this is a really great way to tie it into that workforce development training. I mean, some of what we talked about was this kind of important thing for council members to understand how to address our constituents, for members of the workforce to understand how to address citizens and maybe even us as well if one of us has a disability. So there are parallels right now going on, but until that training is in place, a very simple fact sheet would work well. I did find one Googling. I'm not sure if it's what you're looking for, but I can send it to you. So it's not necessarily an amendment to a motion. It's just I want this understanding rolled into it that I'd like to see some drafts and not just a status chart of, if that's okay, Councilmember Clark, I don't know how much time you have for this, but you're certainly the expert, and if you have drafts, that would be great.
That a question or you just...
It was kind of a question. I was kind of wondering if she would say that if she felt comfortable looking at or bringing examples of term sheets, and so we could approve one and send it to council. If she maybe felt comfortable, kind of coming in with maybe some simple survey questions. One of the things I would suggest is, when people do surveys, right? A lot of people have opinions, but that doesn't mean their opinion is one based on knowledge. So when you give a survey, you want to say, at the beginning, do you yourself have a disability, or do you care for someone with a disability, or see other very opinionated citizen, on the list. So that would help me get good quality data. I understand the cost of surveys. I'm fine rolling it in with a bigger survey and trying to get as big of response as possible.
If I may, Chair Garatano.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Lauren, I'd be happy to, I'm all about charts and graphs. So I would be happy to put something together that's for you to just to look over and see if you as a committee want to go forward with it. I can put that together. The resources, I don't have them all, but I know
It's a
people.
starting point. It's just a starting point, and then we can keep adding to it, and we can ask community members what they want to add. We can ask then we have that great framework that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears on, and we can even send that list to the community outreach task force and say, do you have anything else to add? All right. So, is everybody okay, or do you want a formal amendment to a motion? Just that when this comes back, there's some opportunity with expansion of what we're presented rather than just a status update.
Yeah, I think that's clear there. And I did want to make a suggestion if y'all will let me. Councilmember Clark, I think Dave is exactly right about you have brought this to the attention of the city, probably more ways than anyone has in the past that I know of. And as I look at this and this list here, but also hearing what you had to say earlier, I wanted to share this. There's two ways I think we could look at this. I mean, we could look at this as a checklist and just try to check the list, or and I don't think it can be a checklist, because what you're trying to do, Teresa, is a mindset change. You're trying to change the way that people think, so that when we make decisions and look at work going into the future, that we take this into consideration. And so, in a way, I kind of see this, I hate to suggest forming another committee or task force. So maybe it's something that's part of this group here. I think it's something that we have to give it the right amount of time to work through, like over the next couple months. Maybe it's an item on the agenda, but I see this as a program, accessibility in Wildwood, where we have to define what is exactly the end game, and there are these items here, plus I'm sure many others, that as we work through are going to contribute to the success of saying we did this, we made this possible. And so I would throw it out there. I would be willing to make myself available to meet with you, Teresa. I think we both have a background in project management where we kind of look at this, because it's a program. There are projects already in progress, and there are projects that will kick off in the future. And so for us, we just need to look at to see how do we broaden accessibility compliance in our city. And there's just so many places. And I think we're going to have to start to think about where we have those quick wins, because I think it's important to turn around and show success up front. But also some of them are going to take some time, like a Village Green. We won't see that happen for a couple of years, but it's something you've listed here. And so that's where we need to work with those respective projects or committees to help get these changes, some of them made. And I think we can put together something really nice for this committee to see kind of a comprehensive plan of how will we broaden accessibility that then we could bring to the full council eventually. Because some of it's going to mean, starting to put money towards accessibility from a budgeting perspective next year and in years going forward. Like one item you have here makes perfect sense. Number 7, because we want the city, Steve and others, to have money to be able to make some improvements there. So I think that, we do have the motion on the floor about coming back with some additional information, but I think it's bigger than this, because you even mentioned it when you presented it earlier. And there's also a lot of inputs, I think, that could go into this, right? It's more than this list. It's more than the residents. There's experts out there, organizations. So we want to get as much input as possible to get it right and show our successes as we go along, that we're making progress so that Wildwood could be at the forefront in the St. Louis region from an accessibility perspective. I think that's something you would want to see, and I think everybody would be proud of, to make this a very friendly city for people who have accessibility needs. So Teresa, I'm willing to meet with you at some point over the next month, and we can kind of chart some of that, share that with the group at the next meeting. We can get some of this information back here to this committee. And I think then we could do that. Or if, again, this is in lieu of forming another committee or task force. I don't want to take up staff, additional staff time and all. That's my 2 cents. And so, Teresa, I know you had your hand up, and then Dave.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that how much I do appreciate the city staff and what they have already done and what they do every day, and that they are really focused on disabilities. And I think in our meeting, Rick said it best. He said something that really stuck in my head. He said, so we're saying that we must first address the needs and then the requirement. And I thought that was just so important that's what we're talking about. Sorry, my battery's dying. Let me plug in. So if I die, if my computer dies, I'm sorry. So that was real important to me. We have to think outside the box though, because things like we met the ordinance for a railing down the steps next to the old the name is the shoe store.
Heels.
Yes, Heels. Next to Heels, there's a stairway down into the sidewalk. The rails go down into the sidewalk. There's a tree or something on the other side. You can't get through there now. We met the sidewalk was the right size for a wheelchair, but then we put the rails in that we had to have for the stairs, and now a wheelchair couldn't get through there. So it's things like that I'm talking about. We have to stop and say, okay, we're meeting these requirements, but the operation was a success, but the patient died. So we have to look at it, the whole picture, and what is the need instead of just the requirement. As far as number 6 goes, the community outreach was not only not working on the list of resources for disabilities, but what I really was pointing out is that the city needs a list for themselves for resources when, for example, if they need interpreters, they have a list of agencies to call. If they need somewhere to get wheelchairs for an event, they have a list to go. They know where to get the disability toilets, whatever it is. The city has a list of resources also. And on the TTY is really an older technology, and most deaf people don't have TTY. I don't know anyone that has TTY anymore, but they do have the TDD. Or Missouri is really great for a Missouri video relay system. And I know for deaf people, they will come in and set you up for free with a video relay, the television, the whole system, and a phone number. I think it's something we should look into for the city. They might do it for free so that we can have access for any deaf person that came into the city. They would have a way to make phone calls, or we can use them and you can see the person signing and then hear the relay person speaking. And so then you speak and the relay person signs to the deaf person. It works out really well. It's a great system we have in Missouri. So other than that, I will work on those drafts and get with Joe and anyone else that wants to meet with me, and anything I can do to help. And it can be your project, your success. I just want to help get it off the ground.
Thanks, Teresa. All right, so far I can hear some consensus there. Steve, do you have anything to add? And then we're going to Dave.
I'll defer to Mr. Bertolino first, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Dave?
Yeah, I apologize. I've kind of gotten lost in the verbiage here. I'll withdraw my motion because it doesn't sound like, I'm not sure where we went with this. So I'm going to withdraw my motion and maybe somebody can come back at it.
All right.
Larry's still with us?
He's on mute, but yeah, maybe he'll come back. So Dave, hold on to that
Yeah,
thought.
I'm here,
Larry's back home.
Joe.
Yeah, Dave wants to withdraw the motion. I
I've been
think we're gonna
listening. I'm fine with withdrawing it.
Okay, so Steve, did you have something you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask the committee if they saw any value in arranging for someone from the Central Institute for the Deaf, the St. Louis Society for the Blind, the Missouri School for the Blind, and or someone from the special school district to come and speak before this committee with regards to their specialty and how they might be able to provide some input to this committee in terms of what they might be able to do. I think that could be arranged to ask someone from each of those organizations to come out and speak with us to help us better understand from their perspective. They are the experts. So I was just curious if you all saw value in doing that, and I'd be happy to arrange that if you do.
So I see some thumbs up, and I feel like this committee, is it safe to say that maybe this is something we want to carry for, we're going to carry in our committee as part of it, rather than having to create a whole new task force or committee.
Yeah, let's not.
Let's, and I really think we could do it right. Get some good input and then, start to make some really nice measurable progress. But I would be fully supportive of this committee taking on this. So any objections to that?
No, this
All
is a
right.
public works effort. This is
Even broader, probably. Yep. Then how about, I think then that works out well that, the motion is withdrawn because I think we're going to kind of take even a bigger look at more than what's already on the list. Bring it back to this committee. Hopefully we can get a speaker at the next meeting. But the list is a good one to start with. I will get with Teresa, and again, anybody is welcome to have a discussion around how we can kind of make this a program of the committee here. And I think this is going to take a while. Rome wasn't built overnight, but if we want to do it right, we can make that happen here. Nathan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just I guess quick input on that. Because I'm kind of looking at a lot of the opinions and stuff that we're sharing here, and I think I sort of agree on two sides here. One, obviously with you, Chair Garrett, I know that, I think we need to look at this from a broader perspective and not just as somebody put together a memo with a checklist that we need to do to say, yeah, we did more for disabilities and that's kind of it. But I think referring a little bit to what Councilmember Edens had mentioned earlier about, there are probably items on this list that are really quick knockout type of things that we could show some quick wins. So I guess my recommendation or suggestion would be as you guys are looking at this list and having a discussion over the next month, if there are certain items on here where like, well, that would take 2 emails and somebody to print something off and it would basically be done. If, in my opinion, it would be, let's just get that done. And so when you come back to the next meeting to say, we've already got these 3 things are taken care of, I think I don't want that to get lost in the mix of the bigger picture too, that we're not also making some traction and kind of taking ground where we can for a lot of it. Because like I said, I think there's a short scope to this of like, we can get a few things that obviously are big misses that we could just do. But I also think running through too quickly through this list just to get stuff done, then as Councilmember Clark said, we'll miss a lot of things that could really incorporate a bigger picture and should, but it doesn't because we just focus on this one aspect of getting something improved. So I just wanted to kind of voice my opinion that we don't miss out on some of those really easily completed items that kind of no cost, low cost things that we could just get knocked out over the next month before the next meeting to say, this is already done, you know, but that's all.
All right there. So, you know, I don't think we need to get a motion. I think there's very evident consensus. We're going to put this as a standing item on the agenda, and then we'll come back to this committee with some good information to begin this key work here. I think we're going to make a real good positive impact for our residents and be able to show some wins. So good discussion. I think it was needed to be able to make sure everybody gets aligned on the same page here. So Teresa, you can feel good. You've got the support here, and we'll keep working at it. So Dave, is your hand still up or is that from before?
No, I thought it was down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Rob, I see your hand up, Rob. You always have your hand up.
Yeah, very funny. I gave up. No, it was a great discussion. You guys made good points. I do think that Ms. Edens and you, Mr. Chair, kind of talked us out of a survey in the near term because there's an education process and an understanding, that needs to occur to get meaningful data from the survey. But my understanding of Mr. Bertolino's motion was similar to what Mr. Hopper just mentioned, which was that we were going to just kind of try to knock out some quick wins and so forth. But I think this is a great thing. I really appreciate Teresa's effort and the efforts of the staff, and I look forward to participating. So that's my thing, and I will when appropriate, and that's the next thing I will say.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no other hands up, I think we'll continue with this. We do have a couple items that are not ready for action, high priority. So workforce training, the review of the IT system regarding ransomware and other threats, social media policy. And then we also have a review of a city flag, which is a low priority item. And if I understand correctly, I think that low priority item, the resident that was involved may no longer be a resident. So we might want to check that because it may not, I don't know that we're going to get any more information, Steve. So we could talk offline. We'll check on.
Well, I guess if Mr. Chair, with your permission, I guess I'd like to ask the question. I know that the young man came before this committee a long time ago with a thought of perhaps revising our city flag. We attempted to have some meetings with him, very difficult to do, and you're right. His father actually was on a committee, but then they moved, and so this individual is no longer a resident of the city. I believe that is to be correct. But I'm wondering if we ought to drop this item entirely.
I'm all for it. Less is better.
Well,
unless somebody's passionate about carrying the cause here.
Well, what I would say is that what I can report to this committee is that the current city flag, not the design of the flag, but the composition of the flag is very expensive. It is of a much heavier material because it's two-sided. The one thing I'm going to do absolutely is the next time we get ready to order replacement flags, because they do wear out. They fade, this particular flag, a little more quickly. But I guess I would ask you, Mr. Chair, and ask this committee, do we really believe that there is a necessity to change the design of our city flag. We got enough on our plate.
I was going to
Far
say,
more important. I'd like to see it go away.
I don't
personally.
want you to spend time on something when there's so many more important things going on right now. I think the flag is serving its purpose the way it is, unless anyone has a different opinion. Or Rob wants to design a 3-sided flag.
I think Sheldon Cooper might be interested in redesigning the flag, but nobody else is.
All
Fun
right.
with flags. I got the reference.
All right.
I was hoping somebody would.
Can we drop it from the
Yeah,
agenda?
please do. There's no objection. We'll drop it. All right. Anything under miscellaneous? Katie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just real quickly, the items under high priority have been items under high priority since I was on this committee 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just number three, 1 and 2 are within this year. In fact, number 2.
Okay,
Councilmember
that's
Hopper.
okay. Well, maybe it was in past years that those 1 and 2 were on there.
We probably talked about these things though.
So are we going to get to any of these 3 items within 2021 to discuss them, do you think?
Yeah, if it's high priority, the idea behind that, we didn't always have a high, medium, and low, but the idea behind high was within a few months, medium,
Okay.
6 months plus, low priority up, maybe a year out, we get to the item. So it's just a way to keep us aligned with
No,
important work.
I understand why we
Yeah.
have the levels there. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we totally will. Councilmember Edens is been very passionate about number 1. Councilmember Hopper, I think, is around number 2. And so is
Okay.
the city administrator. And then number 3, I think that's a question. I think that's one. Yes, it's been going on for a long time. I would defer to city administrator and John Young, and then also city administrator had his hand up. So
Yeah, I thought that was pretty much done, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to those items, I will try to devote a little more time on those, particularly the first 2 items, and then I'll address item number 3. With regards to workforce training, I have asked our HR director to provide, and she has done a lot of research in terms of programs that are out there. And so she has provided me with that information. So I have that. And then the next step that I wanted to do and have not, it's on my to-do list, is to circle back and have a discussion with Mr. Bertolino, since this is something that is in his bailiwick, and have his input with regards to the programs that we've identified as being potentially good programs for training. With regards to number 2, I have about a 6-page document. I reached out to our IT provider and had them identify in a formal document to me how the city is protected, our hardware, our software, malware, ransomware, etc. And I also reached out to our website, the entity that hosts our website, to again ensure that the city is protected for all of those threats that I just identified. I am happy to report that in both cases, we have received favorable information that we are protected from all threats. Maybe
that's very good for you to get that too, Steve, because that way you've got insurance that
you have, in fact,
since they're providing the services, they're guaranteeing a level of support and coverage for the city and the records that they're supposed to be protecting for us. So
I have that.
Good job on your part.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm happy to report that we do have that level of protection. I went one step further and also then had a meeting with our finance officer to determine what our insurance coverage is with regards to ransomware and that sort of thing. And we have protection there, a level of protection from a financial standpoint. So we have that. Where my downfall is that I just haven't had the time to summarize all that and present it formally to this committee. I've done the work,
Okay.
or most of the work.
Okay.
Now, with regards to the review of the IT systems, in the same manner that I wanted to have a meeting with Mr. Bertolino regarding workforce training, I want to meet with Mr. Hopper and get his input and have him do the documents and just to close the loop and talk to an expert about, does he believe that everything that I have gathered does in fact protect it. So I need to have those two meetings. So
Okay.
it's not that they've been ignored. I've actually done a lot of work in the background, but I still have some work yet to complete. So I apologize that it's taking longer, but we have an awful lot of things to do with a pretty small staff, and
I know. I know.
it's getting very tiring. So we're doing our best.
I'm just glad to hear that the IT providers have given you some guarantees. So,
right. The social media policy, Mr. Young and I have had discussions about that. We've kicked around some draft policies, and using work from other municipalities and drawing from other sources that we might be able to pull into a policy. Again, something that unfortunately with everything else just has not kind of risen to the top of my priority list, but I will do the best I can to see if I can't move it along a little bit further. And again, I apologize, but
in a previous day and time with the city that had a higher priority, but I just don't want us to get caught in a trap again.
Understood. Thank you for your understanding.
All right. Next meeting is on September 7th. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a great Labor Day weekend. But of course, we'll see each other in council meetings. So is there a motion to adjourn? Made by Councilmember Hopper, seconded by Dodwell. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The motion passes, means adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Great job, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.